we've got a very, very special experience for you. And you out there in JV land, we have a man that we only met a few weeks ago.
We did.
And Sue, tell about the circumstances that we met. Actually,
Yes, it was very interesting. Actually, we were travelling up to Scotland. If you remember, we went up to Scotland. We did a number of shows,
concerts, yeah.
and we were on the way up. We thought, we'll stay overnight. We won't do the whole trip in one day. So we stayed overnight in the T-Bay Hotel, didn't we?
It was.
And we just finished dinner, and we came through the foyer, and there were a couple sitting there, and they had 2 or 3 little pug dogs with them. And of course, I'm a bit of a sucker for little dogs and so on. So I stopped to talk to them, and I ended up sitting down and talking to them. And by the time Jonathan came through with my drink, that was it. We were deep in conversation. And so this was the way that we met lovely Sarah and Rupert. And
if you're watching, hi.
Hello.
Nice to see you. Well,
anyway,
lovely people.
We had a lovely conversation with them, and during the conversation, transpired that Sarah owned this livery stables. Is that
Yes.
right? Something like that. In near
Sussex.
In Sussex somewhere. So the ridiculous thing was that we were hundreds of miles away, but we'd met some people who lived 40 minutes drive from our front door, and so we ended up having lunch with them a couple of weeks ago.
Beautiful lunch it was too.
Beautiful lunch,
Really
beautiful
lovely.
lunch, and really lovely to go and see them again. And they
I think
said,
it's called luncheon.
luncheon.
actually,
It was
as well.
luncheon,
Yeah.
and there was this lovely couple that also lived near them in one of their cottages, I believe, and that's how we met Christopher and Mai.
And Christopher and I'm welcoming the best-selling author, lovely guy to boot, and definitely a brother from another mother, Christopher Winn. Is it Chris or Christopher?
It's Chris or Christopher, whichever you prefer.
And I'm anyway. Welcome to JV Live from the Steinway room, and it's lovely to have you here, Chris. So, how are you doing? How are you doing at the moment? How's work going?
Work's going slowly, but it's going. It's going. As you know, in the sort of freelance world, that you're up or you're down.
Yes.
You're never in between. You're either up or you're there. But no, it's going well. But it's a strange time at the moment, isn't it? We're all feeling slightly fragile, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm still slightly recovering from your glorious singing just
Oh.
now.
Bless
That really touches the heart.
Thank you. That's very kind. That's very kind.
Of course, you've not experienced it before.
I suppose
have
you've
you?
not really. No.
No, this is a new experience.
Well, yes. I mean, we try to. We do what we can. And I have to say that the reason that you're here is not just because. I mean, I did feel a soul connection. One of those things where you meet people and you go, I like this person. He has. It was a heart connection, wasn't it? And I think with your lovely wife, Mai. And it was in that wonderful 6 group, there was such a variety of experiences, cultures. Your wife is Japanese, and so that was a fantastic thing to do straight away. And then she's an artist, and I have plans for Mai. Mai, if you're watching, I've got plans.
That we talked about JV on location. Well, guess where he's going?
He's going to go. Now, she's an artist and an engraver and just a wonderfully talented artist and designer. So we met, and then we got onto you, really, after talking about my freelance career, and we're all freelancers together, and suddenly you talked about being an author, and I thought, well, what kind of books are you writing? Now, you gave me, this is one of many adverts that I'm going to have, and I think actually what you've not done, you've not brought the books in, which we will do in a minute. We'll get them in a second whilst we're having a video or something. But this book, it's called I Never Knew That About, and he has done 16 best-selling books. Okay, these are fantastic books because they are factual books. Now, tell us first of all. Well, we'll come back to you in a second. But these, why? How did you get to write them? What was the beginning of them?
Well, it goes back a long way, actually. I've always loved little tales, strange tales.
Yes.
I've always loved driving around England or Britain, Scotland, Wales. Just loved driving around and stopping off at places and learning something about them. And I think places become much more interesting. Even the most sort of bizarre or banal places become really interesting if you know the stories behind them.
Yes.
And I think it started when I grew up in a lovely old manor house called Cowley Manor in the Cotswolds.
Wow.
Which is now run as Jessica Sainsbury runs it as a luxury hotel, sort of spa hotel.
Goodness.
But when I was growing up there, my father was the bursar of it, or the warden, I think he was called. It was run by Gloucestershire County Council as a conference house.
Right.
And so I grew up in this lovely house. It was a big Palladian house with 50 acres of the most beautiful grounds and everything. And one of the things I learnt when I was living there is that it was in the grounds of this wonderful house that Lewis Carroll first met Alice Liddell.
Oh my goodness.
Because her uncle was a curate at the lovely old Norman church right next to the house. And they think it was in that garden that they saw the rabbit disappear down a hole, which inspired him to have them.
Cool.
And so there was that wonderful story, plus the fact that the house was built by a chap called Sir James Horlicks, who'd invented a milky drink called Horlicks.
Here we go.
With the proceeds.
Here we go, and we're off
We're off.
straight away.
And so just all these little stories add up, and I just loved, and also the fact that running through the garden was the River Churn,
Yes.
which is another possible source of the River Thames, because it never dries up, and it's further away from the mouth of the Thames.
Yes.
So a lot of people would call the River Churn the
source
of the Thames, rather than Thames Head, which is down near Cirencester.
Yes. Yes.
So all these little stories added up, plus the fact that in the next door village, Dick Whittington's mother was buried.
You're joking.
And the next door village...
I've never grown... I mean, nobody's for any interest or where we live. I mean, literally, there is nobody.
Well, they probably are, you see. You just haven't investigated it.
I see, that's it.
Because I had too much time on my hands.
So you started investigating?
Started investigating. The next door village, the other way, is a place called Colesbourne Park.
Yeah.
And Colesbourne Park has the finest snowdrop display in the country. It's absolutely fantastic. And it was built on the proceeds of a chap called John Elwes, who was a terrible miser. So he didn't buy this place. His son bought it. He was a terrible miser. He literally used to make a glass of wine last for a month. And he used to shamble around in the most terrible clothes. And when people threw him a penny, he'd pick it up and keep it and everything. And he was the original model for Scrooge. So Scrooge
Dickens.
So Dickens used him as the
inspiration.
model for Scrooge. And so in that tiny little village, that tiny little Churn Valley, there were all these. There was Dick Whittington, there was Alice in Wonderland, there was James Horlicks, and there was John Elwes, the miser who became Scrooge.
Do you know, I mean, this is just... So, I mean, basically, I described you as a kind of factual pedant. Would that be? I mean, I was reading the book, and let me just say, everybody, you have got to go and get these books. I mean, I am going to just really hard sell this. They are going to be Christmas presents, I'm telling you, for all your family, because wherever they come from, wherever they live, he's written a book about them. So I didn't know. I never knew that about the Thames, Scotland, Wales, Ireland.
So, for example, we were in Southend yesterday doing a concert, and Southend has the longest pier in the world, folks. A longest pier in the world. And how do I know that? Well, it's in Chris's book.
Here it is. So tell us about Southend, just so that the people in Southend who are watching.
Southend is a wonderful place. Southend is the south end of Prittlewell, which is actually the little village there. So Southend is not really.
Why it's called Southend?
Yes, it's the south end. Yeah.
At the end of this, I'm going to just go. I'm going to be so filled with little facts. Do you retain all these?
No, I don't. That's why I have to write them down. People think I'm going to be very good in a quiz. But I literally cannot remember. Because one thing goes in one ear, it pushes something else out the other ear.
Yeah.
I have to write everything down. But I just love it. I just find it utterly fascinating.
We're coming back to these books because I'm more fascinated straight away. You know, we've had 100 shows and we've had something like 80 guests or something like that from people of faith, people of no faith. We've had people who run Dogs for Autism in here with all their dogs and that kind. So we try and go this a very broad spectrum. What I'm always interested in, Chris, and it does genuinely motivate me, is how we started. Now, you and I, it does feel like we're brothers from a different mother. Both had difficult times at school and all of that kind of thing. Very few friends at the start. And so when did it start for you? How did you start in your education and heading towards this and going from... You went to a private school that I knew, my son taught at.
Yes, I went to Dean Close School in Cheltenham, which was
my dad taught in for 2 years. Is that right?
Yes, he did.
Yes.
And so tell us where it's kind of...
I don't know. Well, I decided I didn't... my father wanted me to have a job with a pension. So...
You've really failed him, haven't you? Yes, I hate to say this right now.
Yes, I
Your
have.
dad's very disappointed.
I can never retire because I don't have a pension. And I always said to him, well, by the time I get to that age, there won't be pensions anyway. And that's not totally untrue, not wrong.
Far from the truth.
But so I joined a bank, Barclays Bank, and I worked in a branch in Fleet Street.
Yes.
And I had to sort out the checks of Morecambe and Wise.
Oh, dear.
They had their account there and everything. But so I lasted 3 weeks. Because I went downstairs one day. My job was to sort the checks from A to Z. You sort of went A to L and then M to Z or something like that. And this got a little bit boring after a while. And I went downstairs, and there was a sweet girl on the counter downstairs. And she said, I think they like you here. You're doing really well. In about 3 years' time, you can have my job on the counter, probably. I thought, no, I can't do this. So what I did is I went away and I became a motor racing driver.
Sorry?
Which is what you do if you leave the bank.
Just run that bit by me again. This is going to be a long interview.
It's going to be a very long...
We'll be here
I'm normally being chucked out by about this time.
So you went, Formula One or?
That's what I would like to have got to. A Formula Ford, F-O-R-D, is how you start. So I went and practiced down at Brands Hatch.
Yeah.
And I wasn't bad, actually, despite the fact that I have no idea how a car works. If it stops, then I have to scream for the mechanic. And I also have very bad vision. But apart from that, I was really made for it. Yeah, I was really, yeah.
So how long did that last?
Well, they had something called the Formula Ford Festival.
Yes.
Which about 120 people from all over the country come and join. And I came 7th, which was really pretty good. So they brought me up on the stage, and they said, where do you live? And I said, I live at Lambeth Palace. Because I did at the time.
Here he goes. Here you go again.
Which we'll go into later. But Lambeth Palace, which the Archbishop of Canterbury's home in London, on the River Thames. And they said, well, you have won, for coming 7th, 3 years subscription to Playboy magazine, which will turn up every month at Lambeth Palace. So,
you couldn't write this.
This is not, I mean,
seriously. I have to say, and everybody loved it, of course. The place collapsed, and I was a star. At least so afterwards, when it all finished, I did have to go and say, well, actually, do you think we could change it to a small cheque or a bottle of brandy or something?
Or Private Eye or something.
Yeah, or something, yes, or the Spectator or something, which they did.
Well, Archbishop of Canterbury, I don't know, you might have gone, hello.
Well, yes, no, it was Donald Coggan. He wouldn't.
Oh, he definitely would not. No,
he was a lovely man. He was a Superman. He was absolutely Superman.
Yeah.
So basically, I went practice motor racing driver, and I then had I was in a race up at Snetterton in Norfolk, which is a circuit up in Norfolk, and I had quite a bad accident. Basically inexperienced. A chap came out of the pits sort of into me, and instead of just going around him like that, I skidded into the wall, broke up the car, and I had to pay quite a lot of money to get this car fixed. So I started writing about motor racing instead. And
Much safer.
Much
safer.
So you'd have to get in the car, right?
So that's sort of where the writing came from. I'd always quite liked writing and things.
Have you done it at school? Did you go to university to do it? Or?
I didn't go to university at all. I could have gone to university, and that's perhaps the biggest regret I have in life, because I don't really regret anything I've done in life, because it's brought me where I am now. But I could have gone to university because I was fed up with being at school. And I thought it would be at school. It wasn't a pleasant experience. So I thought, no, I want to get out into the world and do other things.
Well, I don't. Can I just tell you right now? I think you're fine without it. University is only it's a thing, and it comes and it goes, and actually it doesn't look at what you've done.
Well, yeah, I think it helps you to formulate arguments better.
Yes,
and I think you make friends at university that you probably don't make anywhere else. Apart from that, I was always very jealous of the Cambridge Footlights people, because I would love to have done that. I would love to have been, whether I'd been any good, I don't know, but I love the idea of all those students coming together and creating these fantastic comical worlds and things. Yes. So that's my only regret. But anyway, that's how I got into writing. And it took me a long time to get to the books, because I had to do all sorts of other different things. So then...
What else did you do? What then? After you're writing for whom? You're writing.
So I'm writing for magazines and sort of making a poxy living at some sort, sort of writing. And then at the time I was living, as I say, at Lambeth Palace. And I was living, my bedroom was the room...
Why were you living at Lambeth Palace?
Okay, yes, because my father was the bursar there. He turned on from being at the bursar at a conference house in the Cotswolds, Hurley Manor. He then went to Lambeth Palace, became the bursar for Dr. Coggan. Yeah. And my bedroom was actually the room in which Cranmer compiled the prayer book. So I like to think that's where I get my writing, because I think the language in the prayer book is the best, finest language ever. Yeah. It'll never be topped. But
no,
it was a little room in a sort of 14th century tower called the Cranmer Tower, just above the chapel at Lambeth. And it was the most wonderful place to work, because it was quiet. You had a beautiful view over the gardens and over the river to the Houses of Parliament. And
actually, well, also just a little note on Cranmer, for those of you who don't know, Cranmer, he was the one who coined the phrase "to be understood of the people," and that's what he was absolutely keen for, the words of God in the Bible and in prayer books to be understood of the people, because many of the words in Latin were not understood, so that was one of his big things, to be understood of the people.
And he succeeded, didn't he?
He succeeded at that time. It was very Anyway, go on now. Stopping it.
So I was living at Lambeth Palace. And since we're sort of in the mood for sort of royal stories, I've got a couple of stories, because of course one met everybody there. Yeah. And I did things like I sat on the gatehouse and opened the gates for people to come and go, and I buttled for special occasions. And I played butler. Oh, butler, sorry. I was thinking, sorry, I can't. But buttled, yes. Buttled for various occasions and things. But I've seen the Queen from a distance quite a lot, up on the balcony and driving past and all the rest of it. But one day in 1977, in the Silver Jubilee, I actually met the Queen twice in one day, in two completely different circumstances. She probably never knew that. Luckily for her. But anyway, it was the Silver Jubilee, 1977, and she was making a progress up the River Thames. And she stopped off at something that was then called the South Bank Gardens, which are where the London Eye is now, and between the London Eye and the Festival Hall. And she was stopping off with the Duke of Edinburgh, stopping off at the South Bank Gardens. They were going to be renamed the Jubilee Gardens in honour of her Jubilee. And so I happened to be working in the gardens at the time as a gardener. And we were all the gardeners in the South Bank Gardens were lined up in a row to be presented to the Queen. Yes. And we were all standing there in our donkey jackets with our spades to attention and something. And I remember she came along the line, and sort of smiled at people, and then she came to me and she stopped. And I remember just standing there, and there was this, I'm quite small, but she is petite. Petite. Yeah. And there was this exquisite figure standing in front of me, the most famous woman in the world. And she's so beautiful, and like a porcelain doll. And she looked up at me with those incredible eyes, and she gave me one of her electric smiles. And, so literally everybody else faded away. Yes. It was just me.
Just you.
And she said, forgive me, ma'am, but, and what do you do here? And I froze. My eyes bulged. I could hear rushing sounds in my head. And I made a sound a bit like a bleating lamb that has lost its mother. And she shimmered and moved on. Yeah. And I'd blown my occasion, and 2 steps behind, his usual 2 steps behind, was the Duke of Edinburgh. Yes. And he leant down to me and he said, "Don't worry, I don't know what the hell I'm doing here either." And they moved away. And
This is what we're talking about celebration, Sharon. That's what we were saying right at the beginning of the show. This is, I mean, what a...
So, I then had to get out of my donkey jacket and rush back along the river to Lambeth Palace, where I was living, where my father was the bursar, and where she was going to be visiting in the afternoon. She was going to call on the Archbishop in the afternoon. And the whole thing was set out that she would come in through the gatehouse. There's this lovely 15th century gatehouse called Morton's Tower. You'd come in through there, and then you'd go in through the courtyard, and you'd have the oldest fig tree in England on the left-hand side, planted by Cardinal Pole.
Yes.
And then you go across the court, you come to these big double doors, which swing open, and you're then confronted with a set of wide stairs, which you climb to the top of, and there everybody would be waiting for her at the top to be presented. And as all these things happen, you've probably seen everything we've been watching the last couple of days, everything works seamlessly. It's though by clockwork, and you never see it happen, it just happens. And so my job for that afternoon, once I'd got out of my donkey jacket and put my suit on, I think, was to be the unseen hand that opened the double doors as she and the Archbishop arrived. And they would swing open seamlessly, and she would walk up the stairs and present it to people, and then I'd rush up the stairs and go to the back of the queue. So I practiced this for weeks and weeks and weeks, because each door had a big iron bolt. 4 of them, 2 at the top, which you'd pull down, and 2 at the bottom, which you'd pull up. And then you could swing them open, and they'd be latched. They'd attach themselves to a latch so that they didn't close again. And the timing had to be perfect. You had to pull one and sort of give the other a sort of swing so that it fell back. And I say I'd practiced this for weeks and weeks. I had it down to perfection. So come the day, there was a little peephole in the door that I could look through. And I saw that there was nothing happened. Then suddenly there was a wave of girlish laughter coming because it turned out there were some girl guides in the waving flags and things who were going to be presented as she came across the courtyard. And that slightly threw me, because when I was growing up in Cowley Manor, I used to have to read the lesson in church. And next door to Cowley Manor, there was a girl guide camp, and they all used to come to church. And I used to have to stand there reading the lesson in my little shorts, and they'd all giggle.
So you were
thrown although I was much older by then, I was thrown straight back to that moment. So for a moment, things went a bit black. And I saw, because I hadn't expected, nobody told me that was going to happen. But anyway, I pulled myself together and I watched them approach. So the Archbishop was in his archiepiscopal purple, and she was in this wonderful sort of pale blue. And they were waving and being given flowers and chatting to the girl guides and everything. They got nearer and nearer and nearer. And I had the exact moment when I was going to open the door. They got nearer and nearer and nearer. And I could see them growing bigger and bigger through the, it was slightly magnified, and they were getting closer and closer. So I thought, right, now's the moment. So I hauled on the bolt. Nothing happened.
No.
Absolutely nothing happened.
No, I'm feeling sick now.
Nothing happened. And I watched them getting closer and closer and closer and closer. And I thought, any minute now, there's going to be a royal bang, and the royal nose is going to go into the gate. Because in 1,000 years of royal history, the doors have never not opened in front of the Queen. So as you're getting closer and closer, and I still wake up at night dreaming of this sometimes, these 2 faces sort of floating in front of me, closer and closer, and nothing, I swung off it, I hit it, I swore at it, I ran at it, it would not budge. And then suddenly, when literally I thought, this is it, it's the tower for me, there was a whirring sound, and somebody came hurtling down the steps, pulled one bolt down, which freed my bolt, which pulled up the other 2 bolts, and the doors swung open seamlessly, and they walked in as though nothing had happened. And they walked up the steps, and I just hoped they didn't hear the sobbing sound from behind one of them. But what had happened was her protection officer, who was a lovely chap called Michael Trestrail in those days, had seen what was happening, hurtled down the stairs and helped me open the doors. And I got away with it.
Thank the Lord for
thank
him.
the Lord. Yes, he's no longer with us, unfortunately, but I will forever be grateful to him for that.
What a great story.
And then I was presented to her at the top of the stairs later.
Oh, no.
She had no idea.
What do you... And so what...
Thank goodness she didn't.
I opened doors, or not, as the case may be.
I'm the door opener.
So poor Queen had to cope with me twice on her Silver Jubilee. she was able to cope with anything.
What a great story.
Fantastic story.
I hope people are enjoying
They
this.
are absolutely loving it.
Chris, you're worth a whack. I mean, what a group of
Very
stories.
entertaining. No, I was actually going to pick up on what Chris was talking about earlier. I'm sort of keen to know what came next for you, because we're all hanging on every word. I mean, goodness knows where you could be shot to the moon or something, for as far as we know. I mean, what
is the next
what's
thing?
next?
Well, the next thing, after a short and decorative break, was I became card boy for Terry Wogan on his TV chat
Tell us
show.
what the card boy for Terry Wogan. How did it?
Well, when he started off the show, they weren't quite sure, the producers, how to communicate with him, because he didn't want to use cards, which some people do. He didn't want to put his glasses on. He didn't want to use cards. He didn't want to have an earphone with the producers jabbering in his ear.
No.
So they decided to do what they do in America, actually, is they use these big, what they're called idiot boards, or cue cards. Yeah, and so I, for 10 years of his, or whatever it was, 8.5 years of his chat show, I was his card boy. So I would write out all the questions. I'd go into the planning meetings beforehand so that I knew what was going on. And I would write out all the questions, and I would go with him through the interviews. And if he went off, off-piste, which he quite often did, and needed bringing back, then I'd have to make up questions as we went along.
So you were writing them out?
So I was writing them out as, But it was fabulous, because I was right there. I was right next to the camera looking at him.
Yes.
So I was right in the heart of it all, and it was live television, literally live television. There was no delay or anything.
No.
It was so exciting, and you knew that if there was anybody in the news, anything going on in the news, you were going to meet them.
Yes. So you met everybody.
So I met everybody in those days, and it was just, I loved it, and I miss it terribly, and they don't really do live television anymore.
Well, actually, Chris, what I was going to say was, can we employ you to help with JV, because I need someone to hold up idiot boards to keep him on track occasionally.
I think he might be too difficult. I mean, Terry Wogan was difficult enough.
See, this is what we call, and everybody will know, in the JV community, after 2.5 years, right, of award-winning this show, it doesn't matter how award-winning it is, that is called the work of fiction. Because
Yes, indeed.
it bears very... Last week was the only time, I think, since we started, because it was the 100th, and we had to get so many different videos in, and people, well-wishers and famous people and not famous people, coming in and saying, well done and great. So it had to be scripted. And the lady Rachel, who may be watching or may not be watching, Rachel and Claire, the tech team, and Ben, they determine what's going on, and they're often in the Zoom room. So we did a lot by Zoom during the lockdown. We couldn't get people in. So they were entertaining people in the guest room, and then bringing them in, like that. And so actually, they would constantly. She'd be writing to me here, like the idiot board, and saying, "Would you stop it? Would you do this?
Move on.
Would you do that? I've got to take my tablets in 10 minutes,
Yes,
for
you do.
example."
Yes.
So it's right tablets. So you have to stop and take
That's
my
right.
kidney tablet. So, but what? Tell us about that. I mean, what did you know Terry really well, or
No, well, I got to know Terry very well. I remember the first words he said to me, and I did the first show, which was pretty terrifying, I have to admit. It's pretty terrifying, because you're right next to the cameras, and they did interviews from different places, so you had to rush around the set, not get on camera, and sit next to the camera, which might barge you out of the way or anything. So had to be ready for anything. So for the first show, I went upstairs to the green room afterwards, where he would go with all the guests. We'd have a glass of stale wine or whatever it is up there. And first word he said was, almost legible.
Oh my word! Oh my word!
Which was high praise from him. That was high praise.
Was he a hard taskmaster?
No, he wasn't. I mean, that was his Irish sarcasm. It was,
Yes,
you were almost legible.
Almost legible.
And I knew I was in then. I knew that I was fine, and I got to know him terribly well, because obviously it's quite a close
intimate
relationship
it is
there.
a relationship.
And I did every single show, whereas the producers would come and go and do a week on, a week off, or whatever.
Yes.
So I got to know him really very well, and he was the nicest, kindest,
Tell us,
funniest.
I mean, he was
exactly what you saw. He was exactly what you saw.
Such a great testimony of a man,
Oh,
isn't
it
it?
is.
When you see what the Queen is like, on a day like today,
Yes.
you see she was who she said
Authentic.
she was. Authentic. That word, authenticity, is the word that actually we're trying to be.
Rachel's watching.
Rachel is watching, right? Okay, but authentic is what is
you-
the, probably the crucial word, because when Terry broadcast, everybody listened.
Yes.
Because you went, he's doing this like this.
That's
Just he could babble on his Radio 2 show.
Joe, brilliant.
It was
It was
an
brilliant,
Yeah.
actually. It was brilliant, and it just created this amazing community, didn't it?
Yes, it
People
did.
who just
Yes.
loved it, and
The
he came
togs.
up with ideas for him and so on. It was
Yeah.
just
But how was he
fantastic.
with people? I mean,
Very good.
You know, the kind of the people that would write to him constantly. You know,
Yeah.
what do they call them? The
togs.
The togs, yes.
Terry's old guys and geezers, and
Yeah.
or something like that. Yes. No, he was terribly good with them because he knew. I mean, because he was authentic, and he knew that these people helped him with his show. You know, they were devoted to him. They were very often very, very funny. They gave him huge amounts of material,
Yes.
and he was very grateful. And he was he was patient. He was kind. He was funny with them. He treated them like friends.
Yeah.
And he got to know some of them really quite well.
Yeah.
And I think, like the Queen, it's the authenticity and the being himself, the naturalness, is why he lasted so long.
Yeah.
It's why the
Yeah.
Queen lasted so long.
Yes.
Because they don't burn themselves out. They're just enjoying being themselves.
Yeah.
And it's a great quality and a great gift, that, I think. And a great gift if you know you've got it, if you see what I mean. You could appreciate that
Yeah,
you've got
I
it.
think that's right. I do think actually that in my career, it was one thing I aimed for, was that if I think it did try, but I tried to listen to people like Terry, and I learned a lot from his. Since we've been doing this, I'm not an interviewer, but I just love finding out about people, and he always seemed to me like Parkinson. Because he was, for me, one of the gods of the interviewing world.
Indeed.
And we weren't sure how Terry would be, were we, at the beginning?
We weren't.
And we were thinking, well, is it just going to be about Terry? And actually, he was interested in people. And that for me is one of the keys, is that if you're interested in people, and that's me. I'm interested in people, meeting people in Southend. Southend, I love meeting them. I like people up in Scotland. It's nice. And if you go across the Wheels, you've got to meet them, aren't you? And it's lovely. And you get to know people and get to find out what makes them tick.
That's right.
When he died, how did it affect you then?
That was a shock. I mean, I didn't cry when my parents died, because I sort of felt they had a very strong faith, and I felt, they knew they were going somewhere better, and I was with them and all the rest of it. But when Terry went, it was a shock because nobody knew. I mean, only his doctor knew that he was really that ill. I'd done Children in Need with him quite often, and he didn't do Children in Need one year, and so we all thought, they said it was back problems, but we all thought, hello, there's something going on here. But no, I have to admit I cried because I just adored him. And it was extraordinary. And I felt, not unlike feeling the Queen, that was somebody who you thought was going to be there forever and sort of looked after you, was suddenly no longer there, and you're left feeling slightly rudderless and drifting.
Yes.
Until you can find your own feet again. So yes, no, it did affect me quite, and surprisingly, I wasn't expecting that.
No,
because I'm
profoundly.
usually a cold and unaemotional person.
No, you're not. Well,
I think we find that very hard to believe.
There's definitely. I mean, I think it's and actually it's a major part of your life too. You mentioned faith, and I don't. We've not got you in here to talk about faith, but you mentioned it, and I'm interested in how you feel about that, and what, with the Queen as she was such a woman of faith. You said earlier that you have a faith, but it's something in public life which now we feel more difficult to talk about.
Yeah.
And those of us who've been in public life, we've found it difficult because remember Campbell,
Alistair Campbell,
Alistair dreadful man, saying.
We don't do God.
We don't do God.
Yes.
And I thought, what do you mean you don't do God? What does that mean? I didn't even know what it meant.
No.
And I don't think Blair did either, because he clearly did do God.
Yes.
And so it was nonsense. But it felt like toxic at the time.
Yes.
I mean, did you?
If you think about it, Christians have been persecuted for their faith forever. And I mean, in this country, we're lucky. In Egypt and places, and other countries, they're killed, aren't they?
Yes.
And put in prison and all sorts of ghastly things. But I think it's very difficult. It's very difficult. I think I've got to the time in life now where I don't care anymore, and I'm just going to be honest and upfront about my faith, not try and pretend I'm not, or not talk about it or
Not
anything.
talk
But
about it.
not talk, exactly.
It's not that you don't believe, it's just that you don't mention it in public. That's the...
Exactly. Well, it becomes awkward, doesn't
Yes,
it?
it
Yeah,
does.
and it leads the conversation in places you don't necessarily want to go.
You believe that, do you?
Yes. Or
That's
people
slightly-
go off you, or
Yes.
or whatever it may be. And I think we all should. There are a few brave people who are standing up and saying, but I think we all should. But it's not, it's not easy. It's not easy, particularly in our professions, as it were, where you're really not supposed to be a man of faith or a woman of faith, or whatever
not.
it is. No.
And it's an extraordinary thing that they've decided that for us.
Yes.
And that people feel that they won't mention. I know artists who are Christians, recording artists, who are Christians and who are advised by the record companies not to reveal that.
That's right.
Because that would ruin their image, with Glastonbury or whoever. And you kind of think, sorry? That's what I just said, what? And I just went, no, and I always go, no, that's me.
Yeah.
I'm a Christian and I will hold my hand up.
Yeah.
I'm an artist, I'm a this, I'm a that. But that's the
good for you.
fundamental of my faith.
Good for you.
I'm happy to hear. I'll just sing one more song. You got a friend. And that's the point about this community. That's why we won the award. Actually, it wasn't to do with anything else. That's the BBC award there we got for the Music and Arts Award 2020 for services to the community effectively. I sing a good song, there's no doubt. But, that's why we won the award. Yeah. But it was because people, suddenly, they were connected at a time when there was no connection.
Well, how good to know something good came out of the lockdowns.
Oh. And actually, there
So
wasn't
true.
a lot. And it was friendships.
Yes.
It's interesting because interconnectedness, we were talking about that before, weren't we? That there seemed to be people who want to divide and split people up. And that was an interesting concept that you've got there. That seems to be, I don't, if you don't have to expand on it, but that's what it seems to be right.
Well, I think a lot of what's going on today is that people trying to divide people.
Yes.
Because families are individual units that are secure and don't need support from anywhere else. So you can't have power over a family in the same way you can have power over individuals and things.
Yes.
And I think there are people who want power, and so they try and divide us.
Yes.
So that they divide men against women and generations against each other and all these things, and races against each other.
Yes.
And I think it's very, very sad. And I think people are beginning to stand up against it a bit now.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think it's happening. And it's just lovely that when that kind of song, what it presented was friendship. And I think we celebrate friendship on this channel as one of the central planks.
Ellen Thomas has just said the JV family, and that's how it does feel. It does feel that each week we're welcoming our family back into the room and friends that we perhaps have met, people that we've not met, but it's always lovely when we do meet them. Pat Harris was there last night. It was great to see Pat. Never met her before.
Exactly. So we've seen people coming up and introducing Liz Filer. She came up and said, I said, who are you? And I don't know who they are, you see. They see us every week, but we don't see them. But they comment on Facebook and on YouTube. That's what's happening there. It's a constant flow of chat. Now,
I have to say, they are very much enjoying your presence in the Steinway room.
They are.
So
You'll be
thank
back.
you very
I hope
much.
you'll come back because
I'd love to.
we've got
And
so much to talk
they
about. Now,
they are buying his books.
Oh, they're already.
Oh, fantastic.
They're already buying your books.
Right,
and this
I can
one
get through
here.
Christmas now.
This one here is called. I never knew that about the River Thames. So if you want to go on and search, write this down now. So Christopher Winn, W-I-N-N. All right, put that into Google, and it will come up. Now you can buy his books on Amazon.
Yeah.
At Waterstones, they're all available. He is listen guys, we have in the room, so you're just aware, a best-selling author. We don't very often have that. You have somebody like me who writes an odd book. And you've written 15 of the flipping things. 16. Oh, yeah, don't show off. Nobody likes to show off. Chris.
How many CDs?
Oh, I'd say
23. Hold on, there we go. And 2 books. Chris, can I say that I'm so thrilled to have you in. As you can tell, I'm almost... Right, now, I want you to tell me what made you do this?
Sorry, can I
Sorry.
Sorry.
What?
Only because I'm responding to something on here.
Okay.
A few people already subscribing to your podcast as well.
Oh, excellent.
Which is great, because
That is terrific. That's terrific. I have to say that for certain reasons, I haven't done one recently, but I can assure people that I'm going to restart very, very soon. So I think there are something like 13 or 14 episodes out there, and there are
Fantastic.
plenty more to come.
Fantastic.
Excellent.
Podcast with Chris Winn. All of these things, I'm going to keep saying it until the end, and then I'll say it again. And then, now, Chris, all I want to know is, how did you become, I mean, the pedant that's written 16 books, some of them, one of them especially for Christmas, isn't there?
There is a book of Christmas, yes. As we're coming up to Christmas, I did write a book which explains
traditions and
the traditions and things behind Christmas.
Well, I've got to get that one as well.
Yes.
Do you know what? I'm going to be broke. I am.
But actually, can I just say, everyone, it's very easy. I just went on to Amazon and put, I never knew that about, or Christopher Winn. I can't
Christopher
remember.
Winn in.
I put Christopher Winn in, and up he came with all these different books, and I could happily
Select.
Browse and choose
And you
the
can,
ones
and I
wanted.
think actually, apart from the JV collections, you're going to be buying the Chris Winn collections as well for Christmas, okay? Because these are brilliant. People, I notice, are buying more books, and they do love a hardback copy.
They do. It's a lovely gift book, I have to say.
Really
they
is.
produced it beautifully. Yeah.
And can I just point out that your lovely wife
Yes.
has done all the engravings.
Yeah.
So I think they're too small. I can't show you them here, but they're penciled engraved. Hold on, I'm just going to.
Well, you can show them the cover because she did the cover on that one.
yeah.
So yeah,
There's the cover. Okay.
that's
See
her
that?
work.
And on the back is London or Tower? Well, I can't make
That's
it.
Tower Bridge.
Tower Bridge.
Bridge.
All right. Closer, there we go. And the fronts of Windsor Castle, rather appropriately.
Rather appropriate. Yes,
Actually,
it is. That's
the
true.
rainbow over the.
Yes, there should be a rainbow over it. But I was very lucky because when I wrote these books, when I started, I wanted them to be as sort of passionate about the subject and the countryside and all the wonderful stories as the wonderful Victorian and Edwardian travel books used to be.
Yes,
You know,
yes,
they loved it, and they
Yes.
made everything sound so gorgeous and beautiful.
Yes.
I wanted to do that.
Kind
And
of
so I
Wainwright
wanted an
type
old,
thing.
yes, very much so. And I wanted an old-fashioned feel to it, but I also wanted illustrations, and I didn't know what to do. And so my wife said, well, shall I try black and white line drawings? Which turned out to be absolutely perfect, because
Brilliant.
there's something about the relationship between print and black and white line
Yes.
drawings.
Yes, yeah.
And she's captured,
She has.
despite being
has.
Japanese, she's captured the Englishness
She
of it.
has. Extraordinary.
And the Britishness of it, the Scottishness and the Welshness of
Yes.
it. It was
I mean,
extraordinary.
How has she
So
done that? What is that in
she's
her?
just brilliant.
She picks up the vibe.
She picks up
doesn't
the vibe. I mean, we go to pretty much all the places, and she likes to see the environment around whatever she's doing a picture of, so she can get the feel for it.
So you must be one of the most travelled people in the country.
We are pretty travelled, yes.
I mean, we are. I thought we travelled a
I
lot.
thought we were.
We were, but you, because what do you do it by car?
Yeah, yes. I mean, Scotland was wonderful. We bought an old people carrier, and just went round Scotland for 6 weeks,
Oh my
following
goodness.
the sun, wherever we went, and it was just bliss, because it's so exciting to go somewhere for a reason,
Yes,
and
yes.
to explore when you
Yes.
get there and get at the depth of everything.
So
And
do you plan now? Now this is interesting to me because what you're doing, as it were, and it suddenly inspired me, Sue. I mean, I don't know whether I said this to you, but it inspired me to start at Lechlade or up at, and find and go with your book, like an old-fashioned travel book, like Wainwright,
Yes.
and going across the Lake District. And I just thought I could really do. We started doing this for cathedrals,
didn't we?
and Sue started doing her own. She was my guide, so she would find out about the detail online or whatever, and she'd walk me through. And somebody said, "Would you like a guide?" No, thank you. I've got my wife. But she planned it.
Yes.
Now, how do you plan these trips?
Well, I mean, first you decide which country you're going to do, and then you do look it up online to give us a rough idea of where we're going to go, where to go, and where the places are. But once you've a very rough outline, and then you go to the place, and you find so much more once you're there,
Yes.
and it will take you to other places, and you talk to people, and then that's when you find the real stories. But you need somewhere to start off. So a framework from the internet. And then just go to these places. And as I say, it's just, the research side of it is just bliss. Because it's what I've always done. I've always loved doing, driving around the countryside and
Yes.
exploring places.
Yes.
But now I'm doing it for a purpose. And
It's a kind of. It feels to me like you're doing a bit of sleuthing, really, a bit of old-fashioned investigation.
yes, there's a lot of that comes into
bit
it.
of,
Yeah.
Bit of what's his name? thingy. Who's the famous detective?
Sherlock Holmes.
Sherlock, a bit of Sherlock. Because what it seems to me, and let me just observe it, is that I look at the one thing, and the one thing leads to the next. It feels like you're tripping over stones to get to the next place.
That is the most exciting thing, when you start on a story and it suddenly leads you somewhere unexpected, and it suddenly leads you, oh, that's what it means. Oh, that's who that was. Oh, things that you've known all your life but didn't know where they fitted into the scheme of things. And when you start a story and it takes you off to all these different places, that's the real pot of gold.
That is fantastic. What about word of mouth stuff? So if you want to
jump
in,
I'm jumping in. I'm just aware of the time.
What's the time?
It's nearly 1:45.
Oh, goodness.
Can I just say, folks, my husband said to me earlier on this evening, I think we'll probably do a shorter show tonight. I'm not feeling having a longer show. He said we'll probably be done by 9:30.
I don't care.
I rest my case.
I know, we just got to do it, haven't we? So with people, I just want to know about the word of mouth thing. We'll kind of have to wrap it up a bit, but
save it for next time.
Yeah,
do part 2. Yes.
But yeah, part 2 definitely. Come back within a few months, because I think we need to have you back to explore more things actually. But for me, it's the relationship between the oral tradition of things and the facts, cold bare facts. So you can have an oral tradition within a community that says, oh, Farmer Giles, he lived here in 1725 and his son was this, and then he went on and we found by that gate, right, he did a wee. That was it. That was the story. Have you got anything else? No, that's it. He just did a wee right there. It's very famous, and you can still see it now. So,
talking about gates. Did you know that is how pole vaulting started? It started in a Lake District village called Ulverston.
Yeah, which is where to go and stay there.
Absolutely right. Which is where Stan Laurel of Laurel and Hardy was born.
Yeah.
And the farmers used to leap across their gates on their shepherd's crooks. Because they couldn't be bothered to open the gate, so they go leaping over the gates on their crook. And so the first pole vaulting contest was held in Ulverston. And I think the first pole vaulting champion for many, many years was a man from Ulverston who leapt over his gates with his shepherd's crook. Sorry, I digress.
Can I just say, I love that. My cousin who lived in Canada pole vaulted for Canada. So that for me is fantastic. It started in Ulverston with shepherds going over it. And then my cousin ends up going to the Olympics for Canada.
He did, didn't he?
Yeah. Really? That's quite something.
Yeah, that was quite a story in itself. So I think actually, but this is what's fascinating. I mean, what I'm gonna do is just randomly, I'm just gonna open the book at random. Here we go, and it's North Stoke. Right, North Stoke. This is from Wallingford to Goring is the title. Next up, just visible through trees on the left bank, is the early 13th century Church of St Mary Northstoke, famous for its fabulous collection of medieval wall paintings dating back to 1300. The subject of the martyrdom of St Stephen is unique in the wall paintings of this age in England. Buried in the church is the singer Dame Clara Butt. I mean, who knew that? Right, 1874 to 1930, very famous as an opera singer, who lived nearby at Brook Lodge in the South Stoke. With her powerful and distinctive contralto, Dame Clara was renowned for her range and cavernous lower register. She was a real contralto, and was to possess the most glorious voice ever heard. Her recording of Land of Hope and Glory was the best-selling record of the day. Sir Thomas Beecham declared that on a clear day, you could have heard her across the English Channel. Now, you see,
that's fantastic.
That is just... Now, folks, if you don't buy this book, I'm going to have to come and knock on your door.
Of them, whichever ones that just
whichever one grab you. So, I'm just going to give I think it's at the back or the front. Let's see, where is it? Where is it now? It says he's written so many, and I'm just going to highlight them because I need you. They've got a great index, so you can just go and find. What is it you said to me that people always look?
They always look up their own place first.
Yes, well,
their own county or their own hometown.
I went straight to Laleham, and I thought, there's our church where we got married.
I said it's a bit like finding yourself in a photograph, isn't it? You always look for yourself first, and then the beautiful people afterwards.
Yeah.
And you've got. I never knew about England. I never knew that about Ireland. Never knew Scotland, Wales, London, the English, the Irish, the Scottish. About Yorkshire, the Lake District, And I never knew that about Britain, the quiz book. So you can use it for Christmas.
Okay.
I mean, I'm telling you, this is it's like a cure-all for people who are fact lovers.
They're great presents
Chris.
for the people that you want to give to, but you're not sure what to give them. Yeah,
So,
I think they're great.
Look, just last word to you before we kind of head towards a wrap-up, I'm afraid. Just your thoughts, your final thoughts on this day, on this momentous day, having met the Queen, having been so close to famous people for a lot of your life through Terry and all of that kind of thing. I mean, how do you reflect on it personally now?
I feel very lucky. I feel very lucky that I've never been famous, but I've met a lot of famous people, and I find them fascinating. I'm a junkie for fame. You know, I have to confess that. I've met some wonderful. What is wonderful is meeting the real person, whether it's the same as the person you see on the screen or whatever. And I've met some wonderful, but I think perhaps the most beautiful person I've ever met was Audrey Hepburn, who just radiated beauty in every single sense.
Yes.
She was just gorgeous, and to meet people like that, and I've met my heroes like Sean Connery, James Bond, you know, and I've tried on the Augusta Masters green jacket from Nick Faldo when he won it, and, you know, and just things like that. And I just feel I've been terribly, terribly lucky in life, and I'm really glad that I didn't stay in the bank, that it was a risk, but, you know, I went out to the world and I took whatever the world, you know, I took whichever turning seemed best at the time.
I'd use the word blessed.
Blessed,
actually.
yes.
I would say
yes.
blessed.
I said that at the end of my speech when I got married. I said, "Has ever a man been so blessed?" And I really feel like that.
And well, let me say to you that Mai is also a woman blessed.
She
You are
is.
the nicest man,
couple.
and I think you've learned a lot from the people that your parents.
Indeed. Oh, I owe them everything.
Coggan, you've learned
Everything.
from the church, the church that you're involved in. You've got a faith in something beyond yourself, which is fantastic. And also, it's just your down-to-earthness and you're a very affable man. And so, quite apart from being deeply loved by your wife, clearly, and
Yes, we'll discuss that when we get home.
Yes.
probably.
It's been such a pleasure to have you in. I'm almost a little bit too excited, all right, because I love people who just ooze.
Well, you are
personality.
very, very, very good at drawing people out, which is wonderful.
Well,
I mean,
it's what-
you could be an interviewer. You could be a Terry Wogan. You really could.
Well, thank you. But I think actually, do you know what? We just love. I think we just love people, and that's
We
what
do.
it comes down.